Hi everybody, Nigel here. Welcome back to the channel. Part 11 now of the big bad buff build for beginners, I think it is. So where are we? When I left you last time, we'd done a load of sanding on the, if you remember, we thinned out the, on this one, we thinned out the trailing edge of the elevator on that side. We've got this one to do now. We've also got to do the rudder. So we'll thin out that. I've got that taped up, ready to go. I've also gone through with my saw and cut through the ends of the trim tabs. You've got two separate trim tabs here, so that gives that a bit more authenticity. And also, amazingly, I mean, some modern manufacturers could do this. The actual lines line up. Now, not many kits do these days. I think the Model Collect is quite guilty of having these lines sort of not lining up on the control surfaces. So, and many kits are guilty of it. So we're going to sand that out. Now, I've given the engines a quick coat of primer. Got them over here. This is these turntables I showed you, the Tamiya turntables, really handy. What I've done, drilled a hole in the engine and then put a skewer stick in there, and that gives you something to hold on to paint it, and then you can stand it in there on your turntable, or you could leave them on the turntable to paint them, and really handy for storing them to let them dry. And you can see on here, it's a very, very thin coat of primer, so you can see the plastic and the filler through it. But what we do, when we get all this one colour, and this isn't a particularly good one to show you, but you can see here, if I can catch it in the light, if I get it to focus first of all, you can see there we've got an undercut. You can see a low area there that we're going to need to fill. So we'll let the primer dry and we'll deal with that. And we'll look at how deep the errors are, and then we'll decide what filler we're going to use. If it's only that, we could probably get away with using Mr. Surfacer. If anything's a bit deeper, then we'll probably go for our Mr. Hobby filler again, or maybe the Tamiya filler. I'll show you that one, but this one looks pretty good. Not too worried about anything along here because we're going to be scribing a line down there. So if we've got any sort of steps or anything, you know, as long as they're small, we're not going to worry about it because they'll be eradicated by the scribed line. But that one all in looks pretty good actually. Looks like we need to do some more sanding on these nacelles and get them smoothed out. They're still a bit lumpy and bumpy from all that sinking in the moulding. What's this one like here? Yeah, we've got some undercuts there we need to sort out. That's too much to, you can see on the edge of the filler. Get it to focus. You can see sort of just along the line there, you can see the edge of the filler, so we'll have to fill in there and get rid of that. Again, we'll have to avoid getting filler in that hole. But yeah, that side needs some sanding as well. You can see it's a bit too flat-sided. And this is the thing I was telling you, if you're not sure, whack a thin coat of primer on it. You can use Halford's aerosol primer or any acrylic primer. Just a thin coat, get it all one colour, get it matte, and then you'll see, or flat if you're in America, you'll see anything imperfection there. That you see there's a little divot in there. So and it'll show that you won't imperfections that you won't see when you've got filler on there. So and no primer. So this rudder basically is thick along the back edge, and we can also see we've got a bit of a joint issue here on the top of the fin there, so I'm going to have to sort that out. So we'll basically sand it down thin and then put some sprue or whatever on there to sort that, and then we'll come back to it later. So as you can see, I've cut through the trim tabs like that, as you can see there. So they're all done now. I don't know why that one's suddenly, there we go. So they're all done. So what we need to do now is sand, but we need to make sure we don't sand away the detail. So we've got this little fairing on here, we'll leave that, and we've got this here, whatever that is. It's going to be some kind of either light or antenna or something. So we'll basically, as before, get our pen, go over the edge. And I wouldn't normally recommend using pen. I've said it before, but you may have missed it. If you use pen and it remains on your plastic, like if there was no tape here, if I put a big T there, okay, and then painted over it with the primer, it would come through the primer. Then you go with your paint, it comes through the paint. You go with your lacquer, it comes through your lacquer. You can't hide it, you need to be able to sand it off. So generally, magic markers, most of the ones I've used anyway, they come through your paint, so be very careful. So I've got a worn stick here, this is a 150, and obviously 2 layers of masking tape to protect the surface of the kit, the surface of the fin. So we can just sand away here and like I say, I'm being very careful. This stick hasn't got any. I need to replace these sticks. Stop being tight and just get the new ones out. But basically you can see this, unlike when we did this one, you can see that this one's a square section. It sort of just needs to be tapered out. This one, it's coming back and then it's like a lump on the end at the last minute. So, and you can see there by the way it's sanding, it's only taking it off the very edge. So we're going to be careful not to go too far and take too much off. We don't really want to go through to the glue joint. We also don't want to remove this detail. And don't be scared of using coarse sticks. Quite often, the coarser the stick, the better if you're doing material removal, because you're in there quicker. And a finer stick, you're just rubbing away for ages, and you end up just inducing a load of heat, which in this area here you really don't want to do. You don't want to be putting heat into this thin area. Okay, so there we go. As we get to the top of the rudder, it looks like it's getting a bit thinner, and it is actually thinner on one side than the other, which could be due to my sanding I did when I assembled the fin. So we're kind of working to the center line. Okay, so that's one side done. On this side we haven't got the detail of the fairing, but we have got that antenna, light mounting, whatever it is on the back. I must find out. There we go. If you can hear a funny noise in the background, that's Jess with her Chewy. She's just got a new Chewy and she's going crazy with it. And there we are. Nearly there. I'm just going to go across there just to make sure. So we can still do a thinning out a bit more, and we have got a bit of a gap there. We've got a bit of a seam remaining. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave it there, leave the tape and everything on. I'm going to put some sprue glue down here so it goes in and goes hard and seals up that joint. And then when we sand it, it'll be the same as sanding the plastic. If I use filler, the filler could be harder or softer and make a difference. So I'm going to take some of my sprue glue here, which is white in colour because it's made with styrene. And I'm just going to run some along the edge and make sure it kind of works into that join. There's a bit of a seam apparent there. This could actually do with thinning down a bit, I think. Yeah, it's not sticking, so what I'll do is I'll get my Tamiya extra thin, get a pipette, and we will take some extra thin, drop it in there, put that back in there, and then grab a stick of some sort. Here we go, here's a stick, and then we'll give this a stir. If you remember, I showed you in part, I can't remember if it's 6, 7 or 8 now, I showed you how to make the sprue goose. So if you haven't seen that and you're wondering what the hell I'm doing now, then you can go back and have a look at that. So there we go, that's better. With sprue goo, it's difficult to describe the consistency you want to use, but I once heard someone say, and it was a really good description, is work to having it so that it just doesn't string. See, if I pull that away, it strings, but it doesn't quite form the great long sort of hairy threads that you get when it's too thick. And that's better. So I can paint that on now. And because it's a bit thinner, it's going to go on and soak into that join. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not a massive fan of sprue goo for joins because it takes so long to dry, and it also is very, very hot. It's causing a lot of, you know, chemical reactions going on there. It's melting the plastic. So if this was like a longer fuselage join or something, it would take forever to dry out. And if you saw I keep referring back to it, the fuel tank video, you'll see the issues I had on that. The fuel tanker video, should I say. There we go. So there we are. So that can be left now to dry for 24, 48 hours or whatever. Let's put a drop on that corner. And the reason I've done that is because we had a seam. So if you haven't got a seam there, if you've done it perfectly, like on this one, you can see there's no seam. You can see the glue has oozed out. But because this was thin, I think I may have distorted it slightly when I glued it or whatever. But it just shows you nothing's insurmountable. If you get a problem, just attack it. And like I said in my video that I released a couple of days ago, I'm thinking about doing I'm going to do it if people want to take me up on it. A Patreon thing where you can go on, just register on Patreon, £1 or something, and then you can ask a question and I'll do a physical demonstration video on how to sort out the issue you've got. If I can. If I can't, then I won't. And I'll refund your money. But yeah, we can see there we've got to give that a squeeze. We've got a bit of a white joint appearing there. So I think I'm going to run some super glue down the back of that just to strengthen it up. Once it's on the aircraft, these tabs support it. In fact, what I ought to do really is put a block or something in there to support it while we're holding it, because it's just going to you keep flexing it, it's going to keep splitting that joint. In fact, what I'll do is I will run some extra thin in there now. And what will happen, it will probably chase along. There we go. Just leave that like that. And like I said, you will see a lot of modelers when they're doing their seam work. If you haven't seen the fuselage bit, go back and watch me doing the fuselage. They will say just hold the parts together and run the glue down. That is not normally sufficient. Quite often what you're doing is, if I take 2 sanding sticks, okay, so if you can imagine these are your 2 fuselage halves going together, and this is the actual seam. So the skin of your fuselage is here and here, yeah? When you go together, if you look at it end on, if the joints are like this, okay, so this is the inside of the fuselage here, and this is the joint along the top spine. If the joint's like that, if you just come along and run your extra thin down this joint, what's happening is it's going here, it's not getting down to there. With the method I've showed you with holding it apart, getting lots of glue in there and then letting it come together and clamping it, you're kind of getting a chemical reaction going on. It's all nice and hot and everything's going to go together lovely. It's something to be very, very wary of, because the trouble is people will think they'll hold a fuselage together, run the glue down, they think great, or like, you know, something like a tank like this. I mean, you saw me do it on this myself, and I had a white line down there, and you know, you hold it together, you run the glue down, job done, and then you just touch it and it falls apart because the actual glue joint has got no width in it at all. So we'll let that go off, and I need to get the tailplane taped up, and we also need to look at these engines. So let me get myself sorted, get the bench cleared up, and then we'll come back. Okay, so it's been a few hours. This sprue glue's still not quite dry. I've tried to sand it, but it's still not quite dry, so we'll leave that to one side. I've gone on, I used masking tape and I protected my vortex generators there, and I've sanded out both of these ailerons now, both of these elevators, so they're all nice and done. The other thing to do, if you've got one of these scribers or any type of scriber, it's a good idea to get in here and just run down the seam line of the elevator and hold your scriber on a sort of angle, because in reality that would be like a radius on the front of there. So if you look at it end on, what I'm doing is holding the scriber on this sort of angle like this, and then just going along off the end, just a couple of runs, and it just sharpens up that line, and it gives you somewhere, when we put a wash, it gives the wash somewhere to go. Now the other thing I want to talk about, one of the viewers, I'm sorry my friend, I've forgotten your name now. Who was it? I can't think. I did reply, and my reply could have been taken a little bit rude, because I said, you know, you need to watch the video before you comment, and basically I talked about this before. What Revell have done here, or Monogram have done, they've made two identical stabilizers. So basically they're the same. We've got the vortex generators here on the top on both sides, but when I turn this one over, you can see that on one side they've missed them out for some reason. Now they've got this moulded in panel line here, which if you want to, you can sand off. I'm talking about this line that goes around here. Just check you can see it. This one here, and that is basically a marking line for the decal. I have mentioned this before. The older Monogram kits, some of the first kits that came out, they even had stars and bars marked out on the fuselage, and they had USAF marked out on the wing, and they moulded it on to show you where the decals went. Well, obviously it's just not accurate, so we'll leave those on there, because I mean, if I was scribing it, I'd get rid of them. But basically, I mean, raised panel lines, you know, are inaccurate anyway, so there's no point in trying to sand them away and keep all the raised panel lines. But what I'm going to do is put in these missing vortex generators, just so that people can see how to do it. So on one of them here, I've got a piece of tape. Okay, so I've put a piece of tape on here. Now we could go in and we could measure the distance between them and split it out and everything. But the easiest way to do it is to come along with a marker, pretty sharp, and just come along and make a mark where each one is. Okay, so we'll do like 5 or 6, just like that. Okay, that'll be good enough. In fact, we'll do some more. The marker's decided not to work. Like that. So now we've got that like that, so we can come along, lift up the tape, okay, and then put the tape back down with the lines lined up with the existing vortex generators. And what we should find then is we will have, just get that lined up, we will have the positions. You can see I've got that tape slightly out. I'm just going to, I think I'll use some tweezers over there to put it down, so you can see better what I'm doing. So we'll line them up like so, and still out. Just want to give the tape a pull. And there we go, we've got them lined up now. So now we know where the missing vortex generators need to go. So I'm going to take a scriber, a pin-pointing scriber, if I can find one, here in my box of scribing tools, as always well prepared, Nige. And I'm just going to make a mark in the plastic where it needs to go. Okay, so it's going to go on that line, and that's probably why they've left them out. I mean, why would you leave out a vortex generator just to put in a line, an inaccurate line where you're going to have a decal? It seems a bit crazy. So what we'll do is we will just come along with a radius, a round tip blade, and just remove that raised panel line where our vortex generator is going to go. Just going to scrape it away. Okay, it doesn't need to be perfect because it's not going to show up anyway, because where these lines are we're going to be painting black. So I think Jess is going to bark. There we go, and we can just come along now and mark that again with our tool, and then we can see exactly where they need to go. Okay, and then we can take that tape up. Do the same on the other one. So we'll put it's a shame this tape curls up. Makes it difficult for me to see and also difficult to show you guys. Okay, so take the radius blade again. We'll just scrape away where our vortex generator is going to be. I'll do the same here. Now these vortex generators are way over scale. I mean, and they're also not correct. They should be like this. They should be staggered at I think it's 45-degree angles, and certainly on the wings they should be on plates. Which probably means the HPH kit is also inaccurate in that respect. So there we go, that's that there. Okay, so now we can get our pointer and mark on here where it's going to go, and the same here, and mark again there, and there we are. That's our marks on there now. So take that tape away, stick it to one side. We might need it again, we probably won't. We can see there we've got the places marked out, and we've got the raised lines scraped away. Now I've measured these, and they are, luckily, they are about 0.5 millimeters thick. Hang on. That was 0.6. That was 0.4. So we can see 0.5 millimeters thick. We know we've got 0.5 card, and they are 1.44 millimeters long. Right, so there's a piece of 0.5 plastic card. If you've got some of these calipers, then what you can do, I've set it there 1.48. Just go like that and just scrape a line. You just scratch a line on there, and then if you go over with it's best to use a pencil. If you just put a pencil line in that groove and then rub it with your finger, what will happen is the pencil line will stay. The lead of the pencil will go into the groove and stay there. Okay, and then you can just take a sanding stick and sand away, and you've got the line there marking it where you need to be. So now we can take a roll, line up our knife in that groove, just like so. Go along and cut. Okay, we're not worried about the cut edge or anything because it's going to be so short it doesn't matter. Now what I'm going to do is cut this too long, purposely for handling. We want 4 of them, don't we? So I'm purposely cutting this too long so I can handle it basically. So we'll come along, get a different pair of tweezers, with a cranked end, and we can get our extra thin. Okay, so we've got our bench is a mess, clutter. So we can get a drop of extra thin. Now the extra thin dries fairly quickly, so we need to work fairly fast. So we can grab our vortex generator, or piece of plastic card should I say, make sure we get a roughly square end, and then we can put a drop of glue on it and quickly just drop it into position on there, like that. Okay, and that's covering the pinhole. Now with the straight edge we can come along and go up like this and make sure it's in line, and then with another drop of extra thin just drop it in there. Don't be worried about using too much because it will evaporate away. There we go, you can see we've got that on there now with a drop of glue around the base. And then just leave it, don't touch it. So we'll do another one. Make sure the end is roughly square. It doesn't need to be perfect as long as it's roughly square. Nice big drop you want on there so it don't dry out too fast. And then come along, drop it over the hole you've made, or the mark you've made. I can see that's too far back. And I'm going to come along. I don't want to touch that too quickly with the rule because the glue will wick under the blade. So I'm just going to wait for it to dry out a bit. And if I touch it, yeah, see what's happened there? The glue has wicked under the blade and pulled back. So we'll just leave that for a minute. Just blow on it, dry out faster. Now, without touching the tailplane, I'm going to just make sure it's in line. I've blown it over. I'm going to give that a little turn because even though it's accurate to have it on an angle, it's not correct with the rest of them. And I think we're about there. Just nudge that forward, make sure it's roughly vertical, and there we are, job done. Come along to the other one, same thing again. We'll use the other end of that one. Drop a glue on there and just plonk it down on top of that hole. Make sure it's in the right position. Check that it's square. Let's just square it up a bit. And this is important because it's the underside. Well, I might change my mind because I got that glue splodge on there. I may turn these over. Remember I marked them top? I may change my mind. So that's that one. And then the last one, just grab it here, drop a glue, put that one down, push it forward, drop a glue on it. There we go, job done. And just check they're square. It's not that important because they're so small you'll never see it, but and you're probably wondering why I made them so long. Well, it's for ease of handling. If you try and put something that short down, you're going to go crazy. So the reason I've done that is leave them long, and then we'll leave them to go hard, and then I'll show you how we're going to cut them off using the old ones as a guide. Or you could use a piece of plastic card. If you're starting fresh, what you can do is measure how deep they are. So we'll come in with our calipers and measure the depth, and they're about 0.6, so you get a piece of 0.6 card, stick it down there, and then you could use that as your guide. But basically what we're going to do is come along with a pair of nippers and rest the nippers on the two next to it, and then just cut, and we'll end up with the vortex generator the same length. And then whichever one looks best, we use that as the top. Now if you remember, I marked them as the top in case these didn't line up on the ends. But the thing is, we've sanded so much away that all we're left with now is the saw slit. If you remember, I sawed through rather than scribed them, so they're actually sawn through, just like so. And that's much better than having just a scribe liner, because they're actually free to move, so the end should be free. And what we should also be doing is putting a putting a bit more of an indentation in there, so we can pull our scribing tool down like so. And this is all stuff that can be applied to any model aircraft. It doesn't have to be this model. It doesn't have to be a B-52 even. It's general model making practice. And what I'm doing is just pulling the scribing tool down, and then you can see that when you look on the end, it actually looks like a separate flap. So if you've got like you're doing an aircraft where you've got on the wing, you've got an aileron, and then inboard of it you've got a flap, and you're having that flap down, rather than just have this plastic line or plastic flat face, if you get your scriber and just pull it down, you could use a blade, just come along with the blade and do that with the blade, roll the blade over, and then you can make it look like it is actually a separate panel, just like that, and then you've got like that look of a separate piece. Okay, so when we fit these, we're going to remember we're not going to fill this joint and have it looking all lovely. This is a problem with the Model Collect kit. What they've done with that one is, I've got a fuselage here, they have actually moulded the inner end of the, they've completely missed out all the swivel detail where it changes angle of attack, and they've moulded the inner end of the aileron, the tailplane, onto the fuselage, which is incorrect, because the actual tailplane, the whole tailplane swivels, so there will be a gap there, so you wouldn't have a good joint. So we're not going to worry about seam sealing in there. So we'll let those go off, leave them for an hour or so, and then we'll trim them off. Okay, so here we are back with our tailplanes, and we've got the vortex generators there. They're dry, they've gone quite hard. So what I'm going to do now is use my cutters and rest them on the top of the existing vortex generators, so they all get cut off about the same height. Now, if you've only got the cheap and cheerful cutters, they'll do exactly the same job, because basically on the back, when you close them up, they're flat. If you get your cutters, your nippers, or whatever you call them, snips, check the back. If they're flat, then you're laughing. And these are the old Tamiya cutters here. You can see you've got a chip in them. These are the ones that are really flat. So basically rest them on the top, grip the piece of plastic, cut it off. Do the same here, rest it on the top, grip the plastic, cut it off. Do the same here, and the same here. And there we go. So now we've got our vortex generators. Where the gaps were, we've got the gaps filled. So we can now take, this is a 400 grit sanding stick, but it's pretty worn out. Just quickly sand across the top, and if there's any irregularities, it'll sort it out. Do the same, go across the back, go across the front. Same here. As I say, this is a 400 grit stick and it's quite worn out, but under a coat of paint, that will be so much better than just having gaps there. So you can see there what we've done. Okay, getting back to our engines now. So as I showed you before, we've got them primed and the primer's all dry and everything. So what we can do now is come along with a hard stick. This is just a 400 grit. And just go over and basically see where the high spots are, and you can see that as I stroke the sander across, you can see straight away the high spots and the low spots, because where the low spot will be, there will be primer remaining, and where there's high spots, you'll see the plastic. So if we go around here, we can see, if we go around that nacelle, we can see that we've still got a low spot in the nacelle there, so we can deal with that. Again, go around here, and if you do want to use a sponge, get like this is 400 grit sponge is a bit coarse, 600, and just lightly rub it over. Don't push it in, because what will happen is, as I said before, when you push it in, it will take on the shape. You just want to lightly go over it, and just, what we're basically doing is looking for low spots. You can see behind that little indentation there, we've got a low spot. But this will also take off any small high spots. So if there's any, just take that stick out of the way. If there's any small high spots, you know, like slightly raised areas, we'll get rid of them. Like I said to you, when you've got primer on there, it will show everything up. You can see we've got a bit of a low spot around the back of the engine there, or around the back of the nacelle, should I say. So we'll get some Mr. Surfacer in there. And that's basically all you need to do to find your high and low spots. If they're really high and low, you'll see them, but you know, really gentle wavering, you won't see. And if you are going for a sort of a bare metal finish, then this kind of stuff it's not desired. It's necessary. It's absolutely necessary. You need to get everything nice and polished and smooth. Otherwise, it'll look like a dog's dinner when you've got your bare metal finish. And if you get a really nice shiny surface, it'll look terrible. But in some instances, it can look great because it can look like stressed metal effect. So, you know, you kind of pays your money and you takes your choice, as it were. There we go. So we can see on there, we're going to put some Mr. Surfacer in this area here, around here, anywhere where there's grey primer remaining. We know we've got a low spot, so that's what we do. I think I'll paint some all around these nacelles anyway, because they do feel a little bit lumpy and bumpy. So I'll get the others sanded, and then I'll get my Mr. Surfacer on there, and then we'll come back and see what else we're going to do. Right, here we are now, about an hour and a half, 2 hours later, and we're ready to sand this. So I'm going to get my 600 grit sponge again, and this is the Mr. Surfacer I put on, Mr. Surfacer 1000. I'm just going to go around here with the sponge. I'm not pushing it in, I'm just letting the grits do the work. And what we should get is you should get the Mr. Surfacer feathered out. Let's get the stick out of the way, and we want to get the in fact, I'm going to use a hard stick on these nacelles because I want to make sure they're kind of straight and not up and down, not higgledy-biggledy, because we want them to look nice and smooth as they would have done in real life. Remember, these are full of sink marks. So the trouble is, I'm making this video over 2 or is it 3 days, and it's hard to remember what I've already said to you in the earlier sequences. So if I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry. But there we go. I'm currently in the middle of making a lot of your resin upgrades for your B52s. People have ordered the noses and stuff, so that's all going together nicely. And you should start receiving those. Well, by the time this video goes out, you will have received some, I think. Particularly the people in the UK. And yeah, if you are watching this, guys, and you have bought some of those resin conversions from me, I'd love to see photos of your work. I'd love to see how it goes. Let me know how it goes. You know, both good and bad, let me know. But bad, please don't post it on the comments. You know, drop me an email. And the same with good, really. Drop me an email. Because these videos aren't all about having a debate about what's right and wrong with my conversion parts. This is all for the beginner to learn how to build a Revell monogram B52. So there we go. Jess is down here with her chew. You can hear her munching away. It's funny actually, as soon as she hears me talking, if I sit at the model bench on my own modelling, she will sit next to me and whine or cry or bark or whatever, just seeking attention if she wants to go out and play or something. But when I'm doing this, when I'm talking to you guys, she just gets on with her own little thing. She knows I'm busy, I guess. It's ever so funny. So, right, I'm waffling. 2,500 grit. Just go over and smooth everything out. You can see we've got some Mr. Surfacer in there still. We've got some around here, so you can see where it was all out. And what we'll do now is we'll give it another coat of primer. And I know that you may be thinking, oh my God, come on, get on with it. What you want to do is get it all right before you start describing your lines, because once you start to scribe in your lines, if you then see there's something there you want to fill again or whatever, then then you're sort of having to avoid your scribe lines or rescribe, and you can never rescribe a scribe line as tidily as you did the first time, really. So that's what I find anyway. So get this all smoothed out down here. You can see again I'm using the hard stick because I want it to remain, I want it to be flat. I don't want it to be undulating. You can see where all the filler is in these areas where these engines were quite a mess, and we've made them look lovely. And there's no reason why you can't do the same. If you've got flat sanding sticks, sponges, some sort of filler, there's no reason why you can't do the same. On this 20 thou plastic card, I think was important as well. If you haven't got the plastic card, just put them together and sand away the bottom of the nacelles, because they need a load of sanding anyway. But it still doesn't feel perfect, but we'll have a look and see what it looks like under a coat of primer. And at the end of the day, they are going to be sort of sat like this. I don't think anybody's going to be turning the model over to look underneath. So if they're not quite perfect, then so be it. The other thing we want to do is take our scribing tool or whatever you're using and just make sure we keep these lines here clear. Be careful of like what I was doing there. Be careful, because if you pull that and you slip, you'll scratch everything. So it could be best to get the knife and just take the end of the blade and just work the end of the blade in, just to clear out anything that's there. Okay, same on that side, and then you can come with your scribing tool, just clean it out that way. But we'll be scribing around here in a minute anyway, so well, a minute for you, be ages for me. So I'm going to get the rest of these rubbed down and then get them primed again, and then if I have to do any more filling and sanding, I'll just do it off camera. Otherwise you'll be falling asleep. If you're still awake now, well done. Just a thought, guys, before I prime these engines. I've got them all sanded down now. If we look at the fit of the pylons, they're all the same. The engine, where the pylon goes on, you can see this area of the engine here that I'm pointing at is actually wider than the pylon. So what we're going to do is get as good a fit as we can before we fit the pylon, and then we'll avoid too much sanding in that area. And I don't know if you can see that in the close-up there, but you can see it's actually wider. You can see when you look along the back, you can see it sticking out. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use my 220 stick, which is worn out, and basically just thin this out, equal amounts on both sides, just to try and improve the look in this area. If you remember, I put a mark in these pylons. They got cut out in there, so there's one. Okay, and we can see then, and if we fit it like that, we can see that it's over that way a little bit. So we're going to just put the sanding stick on there and then tip it so we're sanding more from this side. So it kind of tips it over. And then I'm going to go in with a knife and make sure that corner is really sharp, because otherwise it will hold it away. So we can go in there again. You can see we've got quite a gap in there we're going to have to deal with. So we can either deal with that gap, or we can sand some meat off the back of the engine. But the trouble is, if we do that, then we'll push this end of the pylon too far forward and we'll have some trouble blending it in. So at the moment we'll just concentrate on getting this right. You can see that corner is not perfectly sharp. As I push it forward, it's kind of riding up. So what I'm going to do is sand it once again. Just check in here. Yeah, it's still riding up as it goes forward. So what I'm going to do is come with the knife and make sure we've got a really sharp corner in there. And now you can see as I push it forward, it doesn't ride up, it stays level, and we can see that we're still doing some more work, so we've got to do some more sanding away on there. Maybe I'll get a coarser stick. Maybe I'll get my 150. So I'm not too worried about the finish, because we're going to have to put some sort of Mr. Surfacer or something in there. I need to try and make sure we get equal amounts from each side. There we go, that's a lot better. You can see now that we've basically got it at the back end, it's all good. Now running down the sides, it's a bit too wide down here, so what we'll do is we'll come along with our stick, just take some off of there. And this is all the good thing comes in about dry fitting, and get the work done, and then you don't have to start piling in with the filler and everything. And there we go, that's a much nicer fit. Now what we can do then, after this is all fitted together, what we can do then is come along with some Mr. Surfacer, paint it on, and then remove it with a cotton bud. So I'm just going to come in with this 400 grit stick here, which is finer, and that will just clean all that up. And then I've got a 600 grit sponge, just to make sure it's all nicely smoothed out. Let me just dry fit that again. As you can see, we've got a much better fit than we had originally. You can see there, the fit on that pylon is much better than it was. You see what this gap under here to deal with, we'll put some plastic card or something in there. But there we go. Okay, so here we are back, and this is like 24 hours since the last, or even 48 hours, and you can see I've got the engines here back on the stand. We've got Mr. Surfacer back in the areas that were low. So as you can see from this, basically you don't just slap a load of paint on and then get it all done. You need to take your time, you know, fill sand, and just, you know, just keep going. And if you are, you know, sort of fed up with waiting for the paint to dry, build another part of the kit, start another kit, you know. Just don't rush it just because you want to move forward, just because you want to push on, because at the end of the day, you know, these engines are going to look totally smooth. There's going to be no lumps and bumps in them, and they're going to look absolutely lovely. And we're going to do the same when we come to fit the pylons. We'll have all the same issues again, but you know, it's a hobby, it's not a race. You're not trying to do it as fast as you can. So with that, as far as these engines go, I'm going to end this video. But just before I go, I was asked a question by, what was his name? Let's look on here. David Marzola. David Marzola asked the question in part 8 about what I'm referring to when I talk about assembling parts and the step and where I use my finger. Right, so I've got here, this is the rear fuselage section of a Model Collect B52. So as you can see, we got the pin locations down here are rubbish, so I've cut them off. So if you look at the fuselage end on, what you can see is I've got these parts taped together. So what I want to do is work on the top first and get the top perfectly aligned. You can see I've got a bit of flash in there that I haven't sanded away. So let me just quickly get a knife and remove that just to make things a bit easier for us. It's not flash, it's a bit of sprue nib. Right, so basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to work on the top half first, and I'm going to hold it, and I'm going to make sure it's all lined up, and then I'm going to put the glue in there. Okay, then when it's glued, I'm going to run my finger over it and feel for a step. Now, what I'm talking about when I say a step, if the parts are perfect like this, where they're aligned perfectly, there we go. If I run my fingernail over, it's equal both ways. There's a step that way. I can feel like a line. I can feel a line that way. If the parts are like this, exaggerated, if they're misaligned, you can see this one now is this way and that one is that way. When I run my finger this way, there's no step. When I run that way, there's a big step. Okay, so that's what I'm feeling for, is getting rid of that step in there. And it makes for, like I showed you, we clean up the seams on the fuel tanks. It just makes things so much easier if you get rid of that, if you eliminate that step. If you end up with your parts like this, what you've got to do then, you'd never be this bad, what you've got to do then is sand all this half away to get it level with that one, or fill this one to get it level with that one. And it's just loads of work. You're removing surface detail, you're just killing the model. So basically, take your time, get the top done first, get it right, get it spot on, let it all dry off, and then move on to the bottom. Because if you've got the top perfect and the bottom is like this, there is a particular B25 kit out there which is like this, and one fuselage half is larger than the other apparently. So if you end up with this sort of thing, okay, then you can work on the bottom and pull it about to get it right, but you know the top is right. If you do both together, you can see, so if you get the top clamped first or glued first, then you can work on the bottom, and if you do end up with a step on the bottom, you're better off filling and losing detail on the bottom than you are on the top, obviously. So that's what that's all about. So there we go, guys. That's been it for part 11. Sorry there hasn't been that much in here, it's just been all sanding and filling and stuff, but as I said at the beginning, it's a beginner's video and we're going to go through everything. I'm not just going to, you know, suddenly go, well, here's the model finished. It's going to be everything, so it's probably going to go on to like 25 parts. We shall see. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again soon. Stay safe and happy modelling. Bye for now.